The story you're about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts about historical characters, events, or locations. Please sit back and listen as I narrate this story to you. Charles Pretty Boy Floyd, branded public enemy number one at one point, was best known for his frequent run-ins with the law and violent bank robberies. In the 1930s, his criminal exploits in the West and Central regions received extensive journalistic attention. Many saw him as a desperate man who resolved to fight back at the banks that had pushed so many other desperate men to ruin during the Great Depression. Charles Arthur Floyd was born on February 3, 1904 in Other Vales, Georgia, to a large family. Soon after, his family relocated to Oklahoma, where they owned a farm and were extremely poor. He turned to crime to get out of the Depression-era hardship, which was especially hard on farmers in the Dust Bowl. He was arrested when he was 18 years old for stealing $3.50 from a local post office. On September 16, 1925, in St. Louis, Missouri, he was caught for a payroll robbery by holding up a vehicle, bringing the money, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was given parole after serving 3.5 years in prison. After being released from prison in 1929, he discovered that his father had been murdered by Jim Mills. Floyd was suspected of murdering Mills, who had been convicted of the charge but had vanished without a trace. Along portions of the Ohio River, he became a hired hand for bootleggers. Then he made his way to Kansas City, where he appears to have soon become entangled in the city's criminal underworld. Floyd's specialty remained robbery on the highway. At gunpoint, he and his associates would stop cars carrying money and demand all the valuables on board. Floyd married Ruby Hargraves when he was 20 years old, and they had a son named Charles Dempsey Jack Floyd, while he was serving a 4-year jail sentence for snatching a Kroger store payroll delivery in St. Louis, Missouri. During his imprisonment, Hargraves divorced Floyd, though the two would restart their romance in the early 1930s. There are various tales of how his moniker came to be, as is common with nicknames. Some claim he received the nickname from a prostitute, while others claim it came from co-workers on an oil rig who criticized his beautiful clothes. He would go to work dressed in a white button-up dress, shirts, and slacks. In any case, he was dubbed Pretty Boy or Pretty Boy Floyd. He came to despise the nickname for the rest of his life. Between 1929 and 1933, Floyd was associated with a group of crooks who began robbing banks across the Midwest. He was a big fan of machine guns, which he liked to fire haphazardly during thefts. Bank insurance rates in Oklahoma were said to have doubled during his criminal spree. He gained popularity among the general public after purportedly destroying mortgage papers at many of the banks he looted, so freeing many debt-ridden residents. These acts have never been fully authenticated and may be legend. He was regularly protected by Oklahoma residents who dubbed him Robin Hood of the Cookson Hills and was known for sharing money he'd acquired with others. The Kansas City Massacre was one of the more well-known episodes in which Floyd was suspected of taking part. Based on a tip, 2 FBI agents, Frank Smith and F. Joseph Lackey, apprehended Frank Nash, an escaped felon and bank robber in Arkansas in June 1933. Nash was being sent back to the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, where he had escaped on October 19, 1930. Floyd and his close associate, Adam Richetti, were in the middle of their own police confrontation the same day. Their car broke down while they were going through Missouri on their way to Kansas City that morning. When the couple took the automobile to a nearby mechanic for repairs, the local sheriff, a man called Jack Killingsworth, happened to come in. Richetti recognized Killingsworth right away and drew out a machine gun. Meanwhile, Pretty Boy Floyd drew a pair of .45 pistols and commanded everyone to stand still. At gunpoint, Floyd and Richetti took one of the other cars in the shop and forced Killingsworth into the back seat. At around 10 p.m., the two drove the sheriff a few miles outside of town and discarded him before heading to Kansas City. There, they happened to run into Vernon Miller, the man chosen to free Nash. Miller immediately asked Floyd and Richetti if they would assist him, and the following morning, the three drove to the local train station, where Smith and Lackey handed Nash off to another pair of FBI agents, R.J. Caffrey and Reed Veretti. Lackey barely had time to catch a glimpse of a man standing nearby with a machine gun before the bullets started flying as the agents moved Nash to their car. The gunfire ripped through the car, striking Caffrey in the head and killing him. The shooting also claimed the lives of 2 local police officers and a police chief. Smith escaped unscathed, but against men armed with machine guns, he had little chance of stopping the escape. The fatal irony was that Nash was also shot in the head by his would-be rescuers while sitting in the car. 2 other Kansas City cops survived by slumping forward in the back seat and pretending to die. While the gunmen were inspecting the vehicle, another officer arrived from the station and fired at them, forcing them to flee. Miller was found dead outside Detroit, Michigan on November 27, 1933, after being bitten and strangled. Miller's alleged accomplices were Floyd and Ricchetti. Their apparent presence in Kansas City at that time, eyewitness identifications, which have been contested, Ricchetti's fingerprint recovered from a beer bottle at Miller's hideout, an underworld account naming Floyd and Ricchetti as the gunman, and Hoover's firm advocacy of their guilt all worked against them. Alvin Corpus, a fellow bank robber, claimed Floyd confessed to his involvement. On the other hand, the bandit alleged to be Floyd was supposed to have been wounded in the attack by a gunshot to the shoulder, but Floyd's body showed no sign of this injury when examined later. The untrustworthy underworld accounts identifying Floyd and Ricchetti as the killers were countered by equally untrustworthy underworld accounts proclaiming their innocence. Floyd's family has maintained that while Floyd admitted to numerous other crimes, he vehemently denied involvement in this one, as did Ricchetti. Floyd became public enemy number 1 after John Dillinger was apprehended and killed, and a $23,000 bounty was offered for his capture, dead or alive. Floyd evaded authorities for more than a year after the massacre, going into hiding with Ricchetti and 2 women, Rose and Beulah Baird, whom they picked up in Ohio under the alias Mr. George Sanders. The 4 of them traveled to New York before deciding to return to Oklahoma. However, while driving through Ohio, Floyd lost control of his vehicle and crashed into a telephone pole. Although no one was hurt, the car was rendered inoperable. Floyd and Ricchetti grabbed their guns and dispatched their girlfriends to find a tow truck. They intended for the woman to accompany the tow truck driver into town and have the vehicle repaired while they waited by the side of the road. However, when the local police received word that there were suspicious men loitering on the outskirts of town, they went to investigate. A shootout ensued, but Floyd escaped. Ricchetti, who had fired his guns at the cops, was not so fortunate. Ricchetti was apprehended and later executed in the gas chamber. The police contacted the FBI to inform them that Ricchetti had been apprehended, and they warned that Pretty Boy Floyd might have been injured in the gunfight. The FBI conducted a search of the area, stopping cars and questioning drivers. Floyd appears to have obtained another vehicle, and he was quickly apprehended by a team of local police and FBI agents in the town of East Liverpool. There are several accounts of what happened next, but all agree that Floyd's car was stopped by law enforcement officers in their own vehicles while attempting to hide behind a corn crib. Floyd, according to the FBI, exited the car with his gun drawn. Floyd was hit twice by the agent's bullets. Floyd's lucky pocket watch and a gun were taken from his waistband by FBI agents. Multiple groups of 10 marks were engraved on the watch, supposedly tallying the people he had killed. Pretty Boy Floyd managed to utter his final words as he lay dying. "You hit me twice," he said. "I'm done for." The agents requested an ambulance, but Floyd was correct. He died on the scene about 15 minutes after the shooting began, according to the FBI. Floyd's body was embalmed and briefly displayed at Sturgis Funeral Home in East Liverpool, Ohio, before being transported to Oklahoma. His body was displayed in public in Saliso, Oklahoma. His funeral drew between 20,000 and 40,000 people, making it the largest funeral in Oklahoma history. He was laid to rest in Aikens, Oklahoma. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took time out of your day to listen to my narration. This is Nikki of Twysted Mind, and I'd like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Salamat.